AOC and everything. And it took a little while, but by the end it was, yeah, completely full.
That's great.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Heather, and I'm one of the co-founders of Indivisible, Twin Falls County, Idaho. Indivisible is an independent grassroots organization that holds legislators and local leaders accountable. We advocate for social and economic justice, and we strengthen our community through civic engagement and collective action. Tonight, we will discuss faith, not fear, a better way forward. This panel discussion is meant to spark thoughtful conversations about embracing a faith rooted in trust, hope, and love instead of fear, power, and control. The church leaders on our panel will share their perspectives on how their faiths contrast with Christian nationalism. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Brian Johns. He's a fifth-generation Magic Valley resident. He is an occupational medicine physician at St. Luke's, and he also serves as a medical director for the health system. He's a member of the Times News editorial board as well. He has a passion for interfaith work, including teaching, fostering friendships, and interfaith peace building.
Thanks, Heather. And thanks, everyone, for coming tonight. Thanks to our panel members for being with us. Really appreciate them willing to share their perspectives and help us understand this important issue. Each person on our panel is a church leader or a pastor of different faiths. I want to point out no particular theology or faith practice is being promoted tonight. Everybody is going to speak for themselves from their own perspectives, their own faith traditions. So I want to introduce them to you. I have these in order. Reverend Nancy Kuntz is a deacon in the Diocese of Idaho, currently serving at the Church of the Ascension, Twin Falls, which is part of the Protestant Episcopal Church of the United States, and is a member of the Anglican Communion. Reverend Andrew Hamblin is pastor at Our Savior Lutheran Church in Twin Falls, which is a congregation in the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. Cindy Wilson is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. She has served as a leader of the children's, young women's, and adult women's organizations and currently teaches Sunday school to 11-year-olds. Reverend Mike Holloman is the pastor of the United Methodist Churches in Emmett and Caldwell and formerly in Twin Falls. So we received a lot of questions in advance, and we're going to try to get through as many of them as possible. If you have additional questions, there will be, or you may have already had note cards, and you can write them on a note card, and if you can have those ready by about 7:45, we'll gather them and ask if there are additional questions. Okay, let's get started. Many people feel a natural connection between love of God and of country, but there are those who want politics and the government tied much more tightly to religion. We will be talking about Christian nationalism. I want to be clear that this is not pejorative, and it's not a religious denomination. The phrase was first coined to describe a political ideology, and now many, perhaps most, of those who embrace the ideology also embrace the label. The movement is growing. In fact, one of the most influential Christian nationalists in the country lives in Moscow, Idaho, Pastor Doug Wilson. Wilson has been described as, quote, a superstar within the world of Christian nationalism. He has a podcast with millions of listeners. He helped found the Communion of Reformed Evangelical Churches denomination. He's also the founder of New St. Andrews College and owns a multimedia empire, Canon Press, which publishes books and homeschooling curricula used across the country and the world. Okay, let's get started. And I'm going to ask Nancy to take this first question, and then if other panelists want to add. First, some background. I want to define Christian nationalism. It's a broad movement, but here are two simple descriptions. First, Christian nationalism seeks to merge Christian and American identities. It demands Christianity be privileged by the state and implies that to be a good American, one must be Christian. And Encyclopedia Britannica adds that Christian nationalists, quote, want the government to promote or even enforce Christianity's position within it. Here's the question. How do you feel about the government promoting, privileging, or enforcing religion, specifically Christianity? Nancy?
So the government actively promoting, privileging, or even enforcing certain branches of Christianity is against the founding principles of our country, as stated in the First Amendment to the Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This statement and language by our founding fathers was intentional. They were of multiple faiths, most from forms of Christianity, but not all, and they came from countries where there was a state-recognized church. They knew, and many had experienced, that the connection of church and government does not result in a government led and influenced by the good news of Jesus or other faith doctrine, but instead results in a church corrupted and controlled by those in power in the government. How do I feel about the government actively promoting, privileging, or enforcing certain branches of the Christianity? I believe it violates our Constitution, it violates the founding principles of our country, and it violates the teachings of Jesus. No, thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Anyone want to add to that, or are we good?
No, I would add that some scholars say that at most, Christian nationalism represents only about 20% of Christians in the country. And conversely, the most progressive Christians on the spectrum only represent about 20% of Christians also. So that leaves us, the vast majority of Christians in the country, somewhere in the middle. And I think that's important for us to remember and realize. And this idea that one Christian sect should be recognized above all others. There's a Christian nationalist podcaster who mentioned that they are the American Taliban. And we all know how terrible that could be.
Okay, thank you. Andy, I'm going to stick with you for the next question, okay? I'm going to quote Doug Wilson quite a bit. So in what Wilson calls his, quote, push for a Christian nation, he said, quote, I don't think a Muslim should be able to hold public office. He feels the same about Jews. He says only Trinitarian Christians should run the government. That precludes members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which Wilson calls a, quote, Christian heresy. He even says that liberal Christians would be excluded from holding office. So in this Christian nationalist view, not very many people would be qualified to control the levers of political power. So I want to get your take on that. What problems do you see? Keep going, I guess, with a test, kind of a test like that for religious office, Andy.
Well, just first from a constitutional perspective, Article 6 of the Constitution says, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. So no, we can't legally require someone to make a profession of faith in order to hold office or to be appointed to a public or governmental position. And so by extension, this means that all faiths are allowed to hold office and to vote and to fully participate in our constitutional democracy. And we need to remember that this has been tried before. Even in Idaho in the 1880s, there was a test oath that forbid members of the LDS Church from participating in government, voting, or holding office. It was unconstitutional then. It's unconstitutional now. And additionally, this argument that we were originally a Christian nation and that only Christians should hold office isn't supported by our own historical documents. In 1790, President George Washington wrote a letter to the Hebrew congregation of Newport, Rhode Island, that said the U.S. government gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance. He was clear that people of all faiths were full partners in the American experience. So from the beginning of our nation, we've had Jews and Muslims and people from all the mainline Christian denominations present in our country. We've always been a plural society. We're perhaps more plural today, but I don't think that's a weakness. I think that's a strength.
Thanks, Andy. Anyone want to add anything to that? Go ahead, Mike.
And just a simple thing, diversity, as you mentioned, makes us strong. Having a diverse way of looking at something, bringing in different ideas is what makes us
a strong, healthy society that we can prosper and keep moving forward.
Appreciate it. Cindy, I'm going to put this one to you. This movement is different from patriotism. I want to separate the Christian part from the nationalist part. In the Magic Valley, for example, there are more than 300 church congregations that all teach about Jesus. They all read the Bible, though their interpretations vary. For hundreds of years, those who follow Jesus have been splintering over doctrinal differences to the point that there are now thousands of denominations. The concern that many people have, including a lot of followers of Jesus, is the way those in the Christian nationalist movement use the, quote, Christian part to obtain and wield political power. So I have kind of two questions. If Christian nationalists do end up having all the political power and running the government, will followers of your faith have any political power? And then my second question is, would it make a difference? If you had power but you knew your neighbor didn't because they were, of the wrong faith?
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank all of you for being here tonight and being interested in the topic. As you've already heard, my faith has been particularly hit by some of these beliefs. Only recently, you know what we suffered this Sunday, which affects every single one of us, whether it be in a place of worship, this venue tonight, or any place where we gather. And for that reason, we need to be here and talk about this. I want to start with just a little history of my family. My family left Norway in 1870 looking for religious freedom. Because they joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they were kicked off the farm where they worked, called the Peterburg Farm. It still exists there today. As they crossed the ocean, they changed their name from Ole Olsen to Ole Peterburg. That's my maiden name. I have a particular interest in ensuring I have the freedom of religion, not just for me, but for everyone. We believe as a faith, this country was founded that we might be able to have those freedoms of thought. You can find this doctrine in our Articles of Faith, which are 13 articles declaring what we believe. And I'd like to read for you. I should know this. All the primary kids aged like 3 to 12 know this. We claim the privilege of worshiping Almighty God according to the dictates of our own conscience and allow all men the same privilege. Let them worship how, where, or what they may. Joseph Smith himself said he would rather die that someone else could have their own beliefs, even if it was different from his, than to not support that freedom of conscience. We believe that we would not have any power in a government which viewed us in such a negative light. The fact that that would also take away rights from our fellow man would be something we would stand up for. To this day, we have interfaith projects going all throughout our community, the nation, even the world. We want to help all people have that freedom of conscience, freedom of belief, and we will stand up for it in every way we possibly can.
Anyone? Okay, we'll let that stand. Well said. Okay, Nancy, I'm back to you, okay? I want to emphasize that we're talking about a specific political ideology called Christian nationalism, which doesn't represent, Christianity as a faith or a religion. And so maybe I said this earlier. Actually, I want everyone to do this. I'll start with you, Nancy. But when I say Christian, I'm referring to Jesus Christ. And so I want to know, what do you believe, or what does your faith tradition believe about Jesus?
Because I know we're all going to want to put in on this one, I'm going to keep my part short. We believe that being a follower of Jesus means that we are to follow his teachings, to love God and love our neighbor, that we are expected to feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, visit the sick and those in prison, and to welcome the stranger.
I got the mic.
Yeah.
I was going to add a little bit later, but one thing. Yeah. One thing is important about words when we talk about Jesus, because we probably share very similar words. And we share very similar words with like the Christian nationalists if we went head to head. But it's how the intent that we use them. And where are we coming from as a group and as a person is very important. Where we say Jesus loves, we can say Jesus loves and I want to exclude you because I love you so much. that I want you to be like me. Or we can say Jesus loves, and we love you, who you are and how you are as a person. So I just want to add in, it's very important to know where you are coming from and the essence of how you use it for someone else, because it could be very exclusive or it could be very inclusive. So
I'd love to hear a little bit from everybody. You guys have anything to add?
When we talk about our beliefs about Jesus, there is a special hymn that I would like to share with you. The title is How Great the Wisdom and the Love, and it's in verse 2. His precious blood he freely spilt, his life he freely gave, a sinless sacrifice for guilt, a dying world to save. We believe there are two great commandments. Love God with all your heart, might, mind, and soul. And second, love your neighbor as I have loved you. And those two commandments really, I think, tell it all.
I think from most of our traditions, we would know the Apostles' Creed. And in the Apostles' Creed, we say that Jesus is God's only Son. And we know that salvation comes through him. In 1 John 2:2, the Apostle John writes that Jesus is the atoning sacrifice for our sins, and not for ours only, but for the sins of the whole world. And that's my favorite verse in the New Testament. And so a belief in Jesus doesn't call for separating ourselves from others. It's a call to build longer tables, not to build higher walls. And it's a call for compassion and mercy and grace and forgiveness and loving kindness towards others. And that's all others, regardless of their faith or their lack of faith.
Thank you all. Appreciate that. Okay. I want to talk a little bit more about what this political movement wants to do, or what Christian nationalism might look like in practice. And I'm going to just use quotes from them. So, Mike, I'll have you start this. The Idaho Family Policy Center, or IFPC, calls itself the, quote, premier conservative Christian policy research and educational organization in Idaho. The IFPC is closely aligned with Doug Wilson. It's been reported that nearly 2/3 of the Policy Center's board have clear connections to Wilson. Their president, Blaine Conzatti, is a friend of Wilson, and the two regularly collaborate. Conzatti told the Idaho Statesman, quote, I would identify as a Christian nationalist. He told Investigate West that, quote, his perfect Idaho would allow only Christians to serve in public office. He also told the Deseret News he, quote, would not oppose declaring Idaho a Christian state and implementing religious tests for public office, although he clarified these are not his short-term goals. Every election cycle, IFPC sends a questionnaire to political candidates throughout the state. Last year, for example, the 12 questions asked about critical race theory, abortion, contraception, sex ed, transgender, marriage, and marijuana, what they called biblical values. Jesus was not mentioned or quoted at all. So I want to ask you what you think about that list of biblical values or family values, and how might your list of values be the same or different?
Those aren't Christian biblical values. Those are political points, political agendas. And you know, if Christ isn't mentioned at all, then we're not talking about faith. We're talking about agenda of trying to co-opt something into making it their own agenda. When you talk about family values, you talk about love. You talk about forgiveness. How does that work in? And how does that work into our policy of the state? How does bringing people in? Because, you know, for family values, you all lived, probably some of y'all lived in the house where they had the house on the corner where everyone was welcomed. You know, it wasn't a front door house, it was a back door house. And you went and had lunch and whatever else. That's family values. How do you support your children? How do you support others? And that can be transferred to other elements. These are all questions and agenda items that separate, that doesn't bring together. And in the end, it's not mentioned in the Bible. So,
Thanks, Mike. You want to add anything?
When we did our planning, we all said we would jump in, but I'm apparently the only one who took that seriously. So,
I have.
so y'all jump in more. So,
Yeah.
So one of the things we have to remember about nationalism is that it's very different from patriotism. And nationalism needs someone to hate in order for it to work. And, Christian nationalists like Kanzati seem far more interested in judgment and hate than they ever are in love and forgiveness. And so the types of values they're promoting inevitably lead to hate, discrimination, and pushing people away rather than helping people live a full life just in the way God created them.
I want to jump back in again real quick. And one way to look at values, also working off of what you're saying, is it about other people or is it about you?
Yeah.
And values are most important when they come from you and not when you're judging others to make them like you.
Okay.
I got it going.
Can we get a female point of view here?
Yeah.
One of the most important principles of my faith is the principle of agency. And when you have someone else telling me, this is how I'm going to moralize you, that's a problem. And that's what they're trying to do. Create their morals as laws within our state. And that's not right.
Okay, I'm gonna move on. We got a lot of questions. So, Cindy, keep the mic. One of the persistent themes in Doug Wilson's version of Christian nationalism was what he calls biblical patriarchy or headship. Men are in charge in the home and society. Pete Hesgeth, the Secretary of Defense, attends one of Doug Wilson's churches in Washington, D.C. Last month, he shared a video on X that went viral about how this movement supports repealing the 19th Amendment, which would take away the right of women to vote. This is a Wilson teaching. For example, he published and highly recommended a book which argues, quote, voting is an act of rulership. Since rulership is not given to women, women should not vote. So, all
right.
Talk to us about this.
I am really fired up now. You got to be kidding.
I'm not.
All right. I just want to say, if you don't know the history of women's suffrage, take a look at what happened in Utah. Early LDS women were these suffragettes of the West. They pushed hard to get Utah women the right to, well, they weren't Utah women at the time, just to get the right to vote. And then when they got statehood, they took it away for a while, but they got it back. And that then spread to Idaho. And these Western states were some of the first to get that right to vote. We are not going to back down and give that up quickly.
Preach it.
Okay, you said.
And one more thing. In my faith, the women are part of councils. We vote on everything. I have sat in so many ward councils where we have a voice. Women lead the Relief Society. We are over our charitable efforts throughout the globe. We have a woman, Sharon Eubanks. She leads the humanitarian effort. We have a voice, we have leadership, and we will hold on to that. Do not take that away from the female sex.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, you got the next one, so you can tie this in, okay, Nancy?
No.
You want to say something else? Okay.
I do,
Okay.
on this one. Because for 37 years, I have been a head of household. I work jobs, sometimes more than one at a time. I pay income tax, property tax, sales tax, gas tax, vehicle registration fees, etc. But under their proposed rules, I would not be able to vote because I am female and divorced. I would still have to pay all those taxes. The start of the Revolutionary War, the cornerstone of our country, was about taxation without representation. Yet what they propose would take away that cornerstone from 50% of the population. Now I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I just want to.
All right, thank you.
I just want to offer. I want to channel my daughter, who has a degree in anthropology, that patriarchy and headship are social constructs. They're not in the Bible.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to stick on the same theme, and Nancy, maybe you can start this. So I'm going to share a few quotes from Pastor Wilson about women. He publishes a lot. It's not hard to find these. He has said, quote, "Godly women want to feed their men. Godly women are designed to make the sandwiches. Wives are to be submissive to their husbands in everything." In a recent CNN interview, I think it was last month, Wilson stated, quote, "Women are the kind of people that people come out of." And, quote, "The sexual act cannot be made into an egalitarian pleasuring party. A man penetrates, conquers, colonizes, plants. A woman receives, surrenders, accepts." So I want to know Whatever you want to share.
So there are some who quote 1 Timothy chapter 2 to support their positions on this, that women should not teach or have authority over men and should be submissive. They claim that these are words written by God, and yet just a few verses before that is the line, "I'm telling the truth, I'm not lying." Would God say that? And while the writer claims to be Paul, it is agreed among most biblical scholars that this letter was not written by Paul and does not follow Jesus' actions or teachings. In the Gospel of Luke, when Jesus visits Martha and Mary, Jesus does not tell Mary to get up and help Martha make the sandwiches. He affirms her choice and her position as a disciple. And in all four Gospels, it is women who receive the news of Jesus' resurrection and are sent as apostles to share that good news. In the Episcopal Church, gender has no relevance in leadership positions. Women serve in all levels of leadership, lay and clergy, including the election and confirmation at our general conventions of a female president of the House of Deputies, the highest office a layperson can hold, in 1991, and a female presiding bishop, the highest office clergy can hold, in 2006.
Thank you. Okay, I know you probably have more we want to say, but I want to go to the next question. And I want to remind everybody, if you have note cards and you have questions, we may be answering your questions, but if you have any additional questions, feel free to fill those out within the next 20 minutes or so. Okay, Andy, I'm going to send this one to you. Some Christian nationalists want to criminalize homosexuality. Again, on CNN last month, Doug Wilson said, quote, "In the late 70s and early 80s, sodomy was a felony in all 50 states. Asked if he wanted those laws to be reinstated in the U.S., he replied, yep." So Pete Hesgeth shared that video on his X account, and it went viral. What's your faith tradition stance about homosexuality?
So I have to say, I really dislike Doug Wilson's stance on this issue. In my faith tradition, we believe that all our siblings are made in the image of God. And how can we criminalize a beautiful child of God because of the way they were created? In my church, in the ELCA, I have fellow pastors who are LGBTQ folks, and they are wonderful pastors, often the best of us because they understand what it means to be persecuted and be othered by society and by the church. Again, Christian nationalism is an approach that's about excluding others and criminalizing anything that they feel like doesn't fit their worldly perspective. And that doesn't sound like a loving God to me. So now, do all Lutherans feel this way? No, they don't. It's an issue we've been working through for several decades, but it's no longer an issue that divides us the way it once did. And I think that's important, that we can be together and still have some differences and still love everyone who walks through the door just the way God made them.
Thank you. I think I'm going to hustle on unless someone's got... Okay. All right. So, Cindy. We'll get to you, Mike. I'll give you the next one. Okay, Cindy. Back to IFPC President Blaine Conzatti. He said, quote, "We would want to see government following biblical law when it comes to moral issues. It would look more like the United States in the 17 and 1800s. America at that time was the most free country in the world." So do you have any concerns about using the Bible to go back to the way things were in the 17 and 1800s, or do you have any concerns about Blaine Conzatti deciding which biblical laws we should follow?
Yes.
Maybe that was a dumb question. Can you expound?
No. There are some things in the Bible that are troubling, as written now. And I remember traveling through the country of Jordan, and we were traveling on a bus, and the guide pointed us up to Lot's cave. And I thought about that biblical story and how I'm a little uncomfortable talking about this with all these religious leaders because they're so smart about this. But I just know my layperson story, and it's basically incest. And concubines were very common through the Bible. And I think that his idea of going back to biblical principles, he needs to get with the 2025 right now. We believe in modern revelation. We believe that we follow the principles of Jesus Christ, which, by the way, I think he has a fixation on the Old Testament as much as anything. And he doesn't often quote Jesus, which I think is interesting as well in the way that he promotes his viewpoints. But through modern revelation, we know, and we have come a long ways in recognizing the right of women in so many areas to participate equally with men, whether it be in the home, whether it be in the civic world, whatever. And for that reason, I think he is not only wrong, I think he's very anti-Christ in what he's saying about women.
Thank you, Nancy.
Short. In the 17 and 1800s, the chance of a woman dying in childbirth was 250 times higher than it is now. And the child mortality death rate was 50%. And we can say, oh, we want to go back to biblical times this way, but not that way. And yet, we are becoming a medical desert in Idaho, as 42% of the OBGYNs have left the state since the abortion laws came into effect, because they don't believe they can care for their patients. I don't want to go back to the 1700s. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I just have to, I just have to add that Christian nationalists love to cherry pick the biblical laws they would like to follow. So Leviticus 19:19 says that we should not put on a garment made of two different materials. And I'm telling you right now, I'm breaking biblical law. It also says in Leviticus 19:23 through 25 that you can't eat the fruit of a fruit tree you plant until the 5th year. Who does that? So, and throughout the Old Testament, the Israelites didn't do a good job of following law. What makes us think we're going to be any better at it if we tried that?
Thank you. Great points. Great points. All right. I know it feels like we're hustling along, but I want to get to as many questions as we can. So, Mike, I'm going to throw this one at you. Doug Wilson is not a white Christian nationalist. He's insistent about that. But I do think his views on history of slavery in this country are worth asking about. He has written this, quote, "Slavery as it existed in the South was not an adversarial relationship with pervasive racial animosity. Because of its dominantly patriarchal character, it was a relationship based upon mutual affection and confidence. There has never been a multiracial society which has existed with such mutual intimacy and harmony in the history of the world." So, Mike, what does your faith tradition teach about race, racial justice, racial harmony?
Currently, it's wrong. I mean, it's slavery, trafficking, all that type of thing of owning someone is wrong. You know, I can go the exact wording, but it's wrong. My faith tradition in the past have struggled with that. We've had the Northern and Southern Methodists that believed in different things. We have worked that out over time and acknowledged that the Bible does push slavery and does not condemn slavery. But as a people who have grown and understanding, know that that is wrong. I mean, can't say that more than anything else. To go back to something and to have that revelation that is correct and people were not abused, people were not everything, is a delusional thought to have. And, you know, when you hear his words, it's hard to accept as a rational person to do that, even though that's very strong for him.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
I'm not going to be short on this one, sorry. This is a hot point for me.
Okay.
As many of us do, the Episcopal Church believes that all people are created in God's image. All people, period. So think for a minute about a 200-meter race at a track meet. The racers have staggered starting lines. Why? Because the staggered starting lines take into account the curvature of the track so that the actual distance is the same. Would it be fair if starting lines were staggered on a straight track? No. You may have an exceptional runner who would make up some of the distance, but all things being equal, the starter closest to the finish line is going to win. That's systemic racism. Those who have been discriminated against, some for generations, have the starting positions at the back, and all things being equal, they have no way of making up the distance. I know for a fact that if my abilities and experience and training and education had been exactly the same, but my skin was a different color, I would not have gotten the jobs I got. I'm glad I did, and I worked hard, but I'm not glad that skin color was a deciding factor. That's why diversity programs are important. Diversity programs are the curvature of the racetrack, so that, everything being equal, those who have a starting line that is set back because of systemic racism have a chance to reach the finish line at the same time as those with white skin who are privileged. This isn't something I understood because I learned it in school or at jobs. I understand this because of anti-racism trainings required of leaders of the Episcopal Church. Back to Doug Wilson's statement. As I understand it, Doug Wilson has resided in northern Idaho his entire life. I grew up in Twin Falls, but I moved to southern Louisiana in 1974 and lived there for 29 years. And I can assure you that there, where slavery had been prevalent, where the Confederacy is still alive for some and the Confederate flag is still flown by many, and where racism is still prevalent, there is not a person, black or white, who would agree with Doug Wilson's statement.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna ask another question.
Wait. I got something.
Oh, go ahead, Cindy.
I thought you were going to talk.
No, go.
Yes, I'm really very proud of this fact. Bless his heart, our LDS Church president passed away also this weekend, it was a really hard weekend. And he promoted a very strong relationship with the NAACP with our church and committed quite a bit of funding to support their efforts, and also committed to root out racism in every area within our faith or the hearts of people within our faith. The person who will probably be next in line to be president of our faith, Dallin Oaks, made this comment during a general conference. He talked about Reverend Teresa Deer of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He said, she reminded us that racism thrives on hatred, oppression, collusion, passivity, indifference, and silence. As citizens and members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we must do better to help root out racism in everything we do.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. I'm going to move on to another question. And thank you, by the way, for the cards. We're getting those collated, and we'll ask some of those here in a few minutes. One of Doug Wilson's followers, Joe Rigney, is a professor at New St. Andrews College and an associate pastor at Wilson's Christ Church in Moscow. He wrote a book, which Wilson published and heartily endorsed, called The Sin of Empathy. I read the book. He takes aim at two groups that I want to highlight. He's very critical of progressives, what he calls the progressive gaze. He says, quote, in American culture in the 21st century, it is the progressive gaze that poses the greatest threat to Christian faithfulness. He warns that many, quote, empathetic and to-the-left Christians are, quote, naive peacemakers and empathetic peacemongers. Andy, you want to take this one? How do you feel about that?
So I am a progressive Christian, if you haven't picked up on that already. And I believe that the characteristics of God that we see most prevalent in Scripture are compassion, mercy, grace, forgiveness, and loving kindness. And at no point do I hear Christ calling us to judge others or push people away. So if Rigney thinks I'm naive, I'm okay with that. Jesus says in Matthew 18:3, truly I tell you, unless you change and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. In my experience, young children are wonderfully naive and empathetic. They are Christ-like, and I think that's our call. So I feel sorry for Rigney and his ilk, who have so much hate in their heart and feel like they're at war with everyone who doesn't believe what they believe. Look, if welcoming everyone to join us in worshiping God and living out our call to love and care for others is progressive, sounds like a much better society than what Rigney is proposing.
Thanks. Mike, you want to add something?
A lot of people go back to the Old Testament, Deuteronomy and some of the rurals, and you can pick out anything you want out of there and push it. But if we take the big picture of what the Old Testament was, it was a series of God forgiving his people for being idiots, for doing things that are wrong, for not doing what they were supposed to do. And he just kept forgiving them and offered grace. And for a lot of people, forgiveness is not a virtue of power. It's a virtue of weakness. And they don't emphasize that. So the Old Testament really is about forgiveness in many ways, with some other idiot stuff put in there, but for the most part, it's there.
Thank you. I want to go to the other group I wanted to point out that Rigney focused on. He focused on feminism and the empathy of women. And he noted, quote, "Women's ordination is a Trojan horse and a cancer." And one main reason he summarized was that, quote, "in general, women are more empathetic than men." And he said, "The same impulse that leads a woman to move toward the hurting with comfort and welcome becomes a major liability when it comes to guarding the doctrine and worship of the church." So, Nancy, you want to take that? How do you feel about this perspective? I thought you might. I could feel it from the side of my face.
So I am a deacon ordained in the Episcopal Church. In my ordination service, I am instructed to study the Holy Scriptures, to seek nourishment from them, and to model my life upon them. I am to make Christ and his redemptive love known by my word and example to those among whom I live and work and worship. I am to interpret to the church the needs, concerns, and hopes of the world. I am instructed to do these things not because I am a woman, but because I am a deacon. And the order of deacons goes all the way back to the 7 deacons appointed by the apostles to distribute food and charitable aid to poorer members of the community in the early church, those 7 men. I am a deacon ordained in the Episcopal Church, and yes, I care about the poor and the hungry, the sick and those in need. I care about social justice and care about the damage we are doing to God's creation. It is not because I am a woman that I care about these things. It is because I love God and I follow Jesus' example of empathy for all.
Thanks. Cindy? And then Mike. Cindy, then Mike.
That was beautiful. Thank you. We have a book of scripture that is another testament of Jesus Christ called the Book of Mormon. And one of the most quoted scriptures in it reads like this: "Inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me." We believe that if we truly want to follow Jesus, we are taking care of our fellow man. We have a worldwide organization that contributes to the feeding, to the housing, to the fresh water of all people. I told you earlier, it is a woman who runs this. I think women exist in the church to make sure this gets done.
Thank you both.
I just want to add in the New Testament, they had Priscilla and many other people within there who were leaders of the church. Yes. And did a lot in there that they weren't emphasized as much. And I want to just also mention about empathy. I've had a lot of women chew my butt in the past. So, there's strong people out there, and it's this typecasting to get power and to get their agenda across.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. Cindy, why don't you take this one? Rigney said, quote, "There are times when God forbids empathy and pity." And to illustrate, he shared 2 violent passages from the Old Testament. I'll just read one. In Exodus 32, quote, "He then told them to pick up their swords and to go to and fro through the camp, killing their brothers, companions, and neighbors. Their eye was not to pity those who had committed such evil." Rigney used a lot of Old Testament passages from his book. I want to share a similar quote from a prominent Christian nationalist pastor, Joe Webbin, recently. he quoted an Old Testament scripture and then wrote, quote, "Christians must learn to hate again." So here's my question for you. How does your faith tradition use Bible or the scriptures to relate to people who believe differently or who are sinners?
We use the example of Jesus. Jesus hung out with the sinners. Those are the people that he liked to invite to sup with him. He wanted to travel with them. We want to do the same. We believe that all humans have worth and value in the sight of God. They have attributes that are just like mine and yours, and they deserve the respect and dignity. To treat them otherwise would go against the teaching values of Jesus Christ himself. We believe that humility, kindness, service are all attributes of our Savior, and we work to treat everyone in that manner.
Thank you. Anyone want to add to that? We're good? Okay, let's move on. By the way, if any more cards, pass them down. We're kind of collating, and then we'll get to those in just a few minutes. Okay? All right. We're asking so many questions, maybe we're covering it. Okay. I focused most of my questions on Doug Wilson. He's so prominent, and he's also here in Idaho. But there are other Christian nationalist movements, and another one I want to ask a couple of questions about is called the New Apostolic Reformation, or NAR for short. They frequently use terms like spiritual warfare, God's army, taking dominion. Rick Joyner, a prominent NAR prophet, as they call some of their leaders, has written, quote, "Churches will start being thought of more as military bases than congregations." Many of them champion the 7 mountains mandate. The goal of that is, quote, "to eventually control the 7 mountains of contemporary culture: family, religion, education, media, arts and entertainment, business, and government." So I guess I would like, and maybe kind of throw this to you, Andy, I'd like comment on your beliefs about this, the Christian nationalist quest to sort of have dominion over the institutions of the world.
So in John 18, when Jesus is arrested in the garden and Peter pulls his sword, Jesus tells him to put his sword back into his sheath. So Jesus never calls for dominion over nations. He never calls us to war. And look, we've seen this type of Christian nationalism before in history. The Holy Roman Empire was a form of Christian nationalism, and they burned dissenters at the stake. The Spanish Inquisition was a form of Christian nationalism. And when we look back at those iterations, we know they were wrong. We know these were bad approaches and bad interpretations of the Christian faith. But we seem doomed to repeat these mistakes when we follow this worldly path that calls for domination and dominion and subjugation of others. And I think this language is a perversion of the gospel. And we see this in other ways. In Luke 20, Jesus is challenged about whether we should pay tribute to Caesar. And he looks at a Roman coin and he says, we should give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. And later, when he stands before Pontius Pilate, Jesus says that his kingdom is not of this world. So it's clear that Jesus didn't care about political or economic dominion. The kingdom of heaven is something that overcomes the desire for dominion and war. And that's how we're called to serve and be a benefit to the world around us.
Thank you. Ooh. Looking at your cards, and I got out of my seat. So, okay. All right. But I've got it right here, though. Okay, so, Mike, I'm going to throw this one at you. I'm going to stick with the NAR. That phrase, the New Apostolic Reformation, was first coined by theologian C. Peter Wagner, who wrote this in 2007. Quote, "Our theological bedrock is what has been known as dominion theology. This means that our divine mandate is to do whatever is necessary by the power of the Holy Spirit to retake the dominion of God's creation, which Adam forfeited to Satan in the Garden of Eden." So I want to ask about this divine mandate, especially the do whatever is necessary part. So according to the Public Religion Research Institute, quote, 1/3 of Christian nationalism adherents and sympathizers agree that, quote, true American patriots may have to resort to violence to save our country. So my question, I guess, is how you feel about Christianity being used as sort of a motivation to take political power by force or violence.
I've been reading a lot in Luke lately. For those who are part of the, what else? Oh, I've been reading a lot in Luke lately because of the lectionary that I'm a part of. Been going through that this summer. And as you read through it, you start seeing how Jesus deals with those who have power and those who want power. And those that want to rise up there will lose. They might get it. They might achieve it. That is always possible. But Jesus always emphasizes it's the one who doesn't seek power, the one who does not have, is the one that is going to be rewarded in heaven, in the midst. So extrapolating out of that is basically, the point is, that is not what faith is about. And Jesus always argued within his disciples, Judas being one of them that we perceive along this way, that, Messiah at that point in time was also looked at as a political person, as someone that was going to take control and bring back the Davidic covenant back into the world and that reality. And Jesus kept emphasizing, I am not the one that's going to look for political, I'm looking for spiritual power. I'm looking to change spiritually the world around us. And so that does not include these thoughts within here of what type of power we are to achieve. So once again, it goes into a manipulation of what they're trying to do.
Thank you. You want to add to that? You good? Okay. Cindy, let's go to you. Many Americans recognize that Christian nationalism played a role in the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Here's just one example. On the night before January 6, before a crowd at a rally in D.C., Roger Stone said this, quote, "This is nothing less than an epic struggle for the future of our country, between dark and light, between the godly and the godless, between good and evil. And we will win this fight, or America will step off into 1,000 years of darkness." He then promised to march shoulder to shoulder with them the next day, and he concluded, quote, "So go with God, remember this, we battle for the Lord, and we dare not fail. If we stay true, victory will be ours." So my question is this. The title of today's panel is Faith, Not Fear. And so there's allusion there to violence, but I want to talk more about the fear. If you have important issues, you want to inspire people, how can you help inspire people maybe in a different way rather than stoking kind of the fear that was in this kind of...
May I start with the statement that our church made at that event? So after January 6th, our church came out with this statement. With great concern, we observe the political and cultural divisions in the United States and around the world. We condemn violence and lawless behavior, including the recent violence in Washington, D.C., and any suggestion of further violence. While this may surprise you, but tell this truth to everybody you know. While the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is neutral in matters of party politics, we remind our members, whatever their individual political views, to be united in our commitment to the Savior Jesus Christ and his teachings. As his followers, we should treat one another and all of God's children with respect, dignity, and love. No political or other affiliation should supersede that covenant and sacred responsibility. We urge all people to remember the precious and fragile nature of freedom and peace. As citizens of the United States, look ahead to we urge our members to honor democratic institutions and processes and to obey, honor, and sustain the law. One of the things that gives me so much hope is the message that we recently received prior to the president of our church, President Nelson, passing this weekend. And some of you may have seen it in Time magazine. It was a birthday message that he gave, asking all people to be peacemakers. Because when you're a peacemaker, you don't just sit back idly and watch as things happen around you trying to keep the peace. No, you get out and you activate. You look at human suffering as sacred, and then you work to do something about it. You participate. You don't stand back fearful. You act, and you do the work as Jesus has taught us to do in his own life.
Thank you. Okay, great. Let's move on. I like that. I'm going to get back to a few questions about the role of women in Christian nationalism. Doug Wilson has said this, quote, "Feminism, smash the patriarchy feminism, wants us to be ruled by harridans, termagants, harpies, and crones." Translation, I had to look that up. By old, wrinkled, overbearing, quarrelsome women, is what that means. And he continues, that sets the tone, and the pestering is then made complete by small-breasted biddies. So, yeah, Nancy, how do you feel about Doug Wilson? I guess the way he's talking about women there.
Obviously, his description of females, starting with old and wrinkled, flies in the face of the fifth commandment, to honor your father and your mother so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. This isn't literal. It isn't only your biological father and mother. It's all elders we should honor. And to use such language is hateful. As far as feminism wanting to smash the patriarchy, yes, because patriarchy is the problem. But that feminism means that we should be ruled by women, however described, hopefully not like he did, that is not true. Patriarchy claims superiority and power and control. Feminism fights for equality, not power. I have my gray hair and wrinkles, and I earned every one of them in a life of hard work and doing the best for my family, friends, clients, and those in need. And of those terrible names he used, there is one I will accept. He can call me a crone, because crone also means wise woman. I'll take that one.
Okay, all right, and let's drop the mic, leave it there. Okay, Nancy, I'm going to stick with you, though. This next question, Christian, and anyone else can weigh in, but Nancy, you can start. Christian nationalism is associated with fierce opposition to and control over abortion. The Idaho GOP platform describes that, quote, all murders by abortion should be criminalized, including for victims of rape and incest. A bill was introduced in the Idaho Senate in February that would allow women who get abortions to be prosecuted for murder, with no exceptions for victims of rape or incest. The bill did not move out of committee, but it gained over a dozen legislative co-sponsors, including 4 from our valley, Senators Colin Zeiderveld and Representative Hostetler and Levitt. In anticipation of the bill being reintroduced in the future, IFPC is seeking to, quote, improve the bill in ways that would increase its effectiveness and chances of success. Since 2022, when the near-total abortion ban took effect in Idaho, we have lost approximately 42% of our OB-GYN specialists. The American Medical Association says this law, quote, undermines core medical ethics, forcing doctors to put women's lives and health at risk. So, here's my question. Right now, in the U.S., women have different rights depending on what state they live in. That's not true of men. At least IFPC, Christian nationalists here want to compel women to bear their babies no matter what, no matter if they were impregnated by a rapist, no matter if they were incest victims, no matter if it means the woman might die or get so sick that she loses her ability to have children in the future. So, no matter what. And I want to know how you feel about that from the standpoint of a woman and from your faith.
So I would like to read to you a resolution passed by the 80th General Convention of the Episcopal Church. The General Convention is our governing body. It is made up of clergy and lay representatives of every diocese from the Episcopal Church around the world. Resolved that the 80th General Convention recognizes that pregnancy and childbirth are dangerous undertakings that risk permanent disability and death for those who bear children. And be it further resolved that the Episcopal Church reaffirms that parenthood should be initiated only advisedly and in full accord with this understanding of the power to conceive and give birth, which is bestowed by God. And be it further resolved that the Episcopal Church recognizes that access to abortion is a key element in preserving the health, independence, and autonomy of those who can bear children. And be it further resolved that the 80th General Convention affirms that all Episcopalians should be able to access abortion services and birth control with no restriction on movement, autonomy, type, or timing. And be it further resolved that the 80th General Convention understands that the protection of religious liberty extends to all Episcopalians, and I believe others, who may need or desire to access, to utilize, to aid others in the procurement of, or to offer abortion services. The Episcopal Church has taken the stand that abortion should be available to all women.
Thank you. Anyone else like to add to that?
I will add, that's one issue that is very powerful and is very personal to each and every one of you here. And probably no one has the same exact view. It's in shades, it's in percentages of what you feel. But that's important because that should be your view. That should not be anyone else's view, and you should have power over those decisions And those are heart-wrenching decisions to do, especially at that point in time. It's very difficult to do. My opinion should not be a part of that. My opinion as a male should not be a part of that decision-making process and having that power over your personal view, your personal struggle, your personal place that you are at that point in time. And faith and religion and family and everything falls into that, but it is your choice in the end. It's not the governor of Idaho. It's not that grouping that sits in that room. It's not anyone else. It is a heart-wrenching decision that they should not have any part of at all. And you might go many different directions for many different reasons, but that is strictly your place, and you should not have to answer to anyone over those decisions.
Thanks, Mike. We good? We good on that? Okay. Let's go on. Let's do one more question that I have. Well, these are questions people asked beforehand, but and then I'm going to get to the cards, and I think that'll give us time. We're going to be out here at 8:30. Okay, Cindy, I'm going to throw this to you. Doug Wilson is, quote, by his own description, an outspoken proponent of Christian theocracy. The First Amendment to the Constitution says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And so my question is really, right now we don't have a theocracy, and I wonder if you could explain your thoughts or feelings about Constitution, the First Amendment.
I love talking about the Constitution. So I was a government teacher for 33 years, and this is my favorite topic. The First Amendment, clearly the most important in terms of amendments, clearly has a religion clause that has two pieces to it. And this is what I used to tell my seniors. It has a freedom from religion. You do not have to be religious if that is not your choice. And a freedom of religion. You may practice your religion freely as long as it does not violate the rights of anyone else. That is a clear definition. We know that Thomas Jefferson wrote about that after he had received a letter from the Danbury Baptist Church on this issue. Separation of church and state is clear. We are not a theocracy. I have been in nations which have theocracies. It is a completely different life. We will not give up our freedom of free expression of religion or our freedom from.
Thank you. Okay, good. We're going to get to some audience questions. So by far, most of the questions, and we've kind of collated these so they're by subject, so it may not be exactly the way you worded it, but basically, what can we do to sort of fight against this amongst our fight? Some say fight. I shouldn't say fight against our neighbors, but if we have neighbors who embrace this ideology in our churches, what are you doing in your churches to slow the stampede of Christian nationalism? What would you like your church to do to help resist Christian nationalism? So a lot of questions about that. If you could, that wasn't a real question, but can you get the gist of what people are asking? Would anyone like to take that one? Yeah. Go ahead, Nancy.
Christian nationalism is gaining strength because there are people in political office who have claimed that theology. So the important thing, and as a religious person, I am promoting this, that you get out and vote. Make sure that the people that you are electing are the people that you want representing you, and know what they are. Don't just vote by the letter that's behind their name.
I have a dear friend who, Allison and Chanel know her. She worked with us lobbying the legislature last year. She is not a member of my faith, but she is very faithful woman in her own church. And once we started talking about Christian nationalism, she said, well, wait a minute. I'm hearing some of these things in my church. And we shared with her some of what we know to be true and some of the things that you've heard here tonight. And guess what she did? She started questioning. And she started talking to her fellow parishioners and asking them to question. In fact, Just today, I received a text from her saying, I'm finding out some things about my church and the school we support.
Okay, thanks, Cindy. Mike, you have something?
I just emphasize is question, ask, look into, know what you're talking about. Talk to your children, talk to your grandchildren, share what your views are and what's important, and understand that the politics that are going on, when you see people being censored or called stupid or don't know anything, listen to them, because in Nazi Germany, the first people that were really taken away were the politicians. Before anything else, they were the ones that were silenced, who did not agree and did not partake. Know how you vote and bring it up in church. I mean, as a minister at my church, I love it when people ask questions. I love people when they stop me and challenge me. Do that. And if they don't want to answer, I think that says an awful lot. So be wise in what you do.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a related question then because of what you said. So I'm gonna skip the one I was about to do. This is a really good question. I pastor a small church in Filer where most of the congregation identify as Christian nationalists. I do not, finding it completely incompatible with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And yet any hint of my convictions causes conflict between me and my congregation. What practices or methods might I try to help my church see the harm and incompatibility with nationalism? That is a heartfelt question. I would love to get your perspective on that. Anybody?
Yeah, I would say that, what a tough spot. And, preach the gospel. The gospel is the most radical thing we will ever hear. The gospel turns upside down the standards of the world. And when we preach the gospel and when we stick to the gospel and hammer away at the gospel, I think that's the only path forward, honestly.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Anyone else?
I minister in the church in Emmett, Idaho. Ammon Bundy's headquarters was a half mile down the street from my church. And people had their followers all over. And the thing is, you have to listen. I'm going to say, make friends with the conservative. I do. Have conversation. Keep that dialogue going. As a minister, my people generally now agree, but be willing to have people walk out, even though it might not be financially part of what you want to meet budget at church. And as you said, preach gospel and not ideology, and people start listening and start paying attention and ask questions. And then others will show up at the church because you might be the only church in town that really listens.
I'm going to give it to you, Cindy, but I just had a thought. There is a resources QR code, right? Okay, so there are a bunch of resources on one of those sheets you got that has a QR code that has a bunch of resources where you could learn about the movement, and some of them have to do with how you could relate to people. So that might answer that question more fully. That one there.
There's a front and back.
Okay, so that might help answer that question more deeply. But did you have a comment, Cindy?
Yes, and I really want to second what's already been said here. I recently attended a conference on democracy, and one of the things we talked about is you have to talk to people with whom you disagree. So we have to talk to people. Jesus said it best when he talked to us about humbling ourselves, becoming like a little child. When we humble ourselves and we go to someone with sincere intent, ask if you can have a prayer before you start talking about it. Bring a spirit into that meeting to where you have mutual respect for one another. And then again, I love what you said about share the gospel.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, I'm gonna go with a related question, I think. Why don't we hear more faith leaders talking about this? Anything you want to add to what we've already shared?
I think a lot is scared. Like I said, it's when you run a church, you have to make budget and everything else. It's scary. Are you going to run people off? Especially, it's hard to preach I hate the word progressive gospel, because I think that is the gospel, not the others are conservative gospel. But there's small percentages in town that might come because people want to go where the flash is. And I think a lot of people are just plain scared.
Okay. That's a real answer. Anyone
Yeah.
else? Faith over fear. There we go.
That's right. I think a lot of us were taught that you don't talk politics from the pulpit. And that's where we're walking a tight line. That it's hard to separate politics from Christian nationalism. The bottom line is they're not talking about Christianity as we know it. But you mention that and it verges into politics. But I think in some ways we have to stick the toe in because of the very reason that you have people who do think, I'm a Christian and I'm a patriot, so therefore I must be a Christian nationalist, when that is not what the movement is.
I tell my church that a lot of things I preach on are political now. 10 years ago, they were not. But other people have made preaching the gospel of do unto others as you would want to have done unto you, it's a basic thing, is now political. Empathy is now political. Women's roles in the church is now political. They were not 10 years ago, even less than that. And so when people think I'm talking politics, I haven't changed what I've been talking about. Others have changed their perception of what I am talking about. So I'm not talking politics. I'm talking, as we say, Christian faith, gospel, doctrine that we have been taught. So politics have come in.
Thank you. I'm going to do a little time check. We've got just a few more questions from the audience. We're going to try to do that in about 10 minutes so that we have time for our last question for the panel. Okay, so there were a couple of questions about relating to your neighbor, if your neighbor is a Christian nationalist. I mean, anything, I know we've kind of talked about it a little bit. Is there anything you'd like to add about that, like if you have a neighbor? So this isn't maybe necessarily as a church leader, but as a person?
The hard part about being a Christian that's called to love your neighbor is it doesn't qualify who those neighbors are. And so, yeah, you got to talk even to the neighbor you disagree with. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them. And you can share your faith. You can live out your faith in very real ways. But I think that's the hardest part about trying to really live out your faith is that you don't get just to hang out with the folks that agree with you.
I love that. My husband and I talk about this all the time. We live next to people who don't agree with us spiritually or politically. And you know what we say? We're going to love them so much that they can't help but love us back. And I think you're absolutely right. It's how we live. When we live with love and peace, and we want to show the world, this is how we get along. This is how we live together. You can't deny that.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Some of these might be fast. Will your church excommunicate members of the Trump administration? Just quick answer. No. Okay.
No.
Okay. All right.
No, but the Book of Mormon talks about no kings.
No kings. Okay. So this statement has been fact checked. So this is true. So what did you think of J.D. Vance's recent comment instructing his followers to don the armor of God and fight and destroy progressive ideologies? Anyone want to answer that? Or we kind of already answered. You think I don't like it? Is that what you're going to say? Okay. Any other comments? Okay. So
We know that Jesus is about peace. He's not about war. He's not about fighting. Any violent language is not about Jesus.
Why do you think this ideology is spreading so quickly amongst young men? Any insights or thoughts about that? You can say that if you want. Just say it in the microphone.
People want to be important. People feel disenfranchised at this point. My kids will never own a house. I'm lucky to have purchased a house. They don't get jobs that they want, and luckily I have kids that fall in my ideological line, but others fall into something that they feel important, that they feel that someone has given them power, that they feel someone is actually listening to their needs. And there's other ways you can go further on, but they're lost. And We somehow have pushed them out or missed those clues. You know, we have to own up to some of our own issues too, of forgetting them.
And we need to be ready to accept them when they come back. And we need
Yeah.
to reach out with open arms and love to bring them back.
Anyone else? Okay, I got a last minute question. Let's try to sneak it in real fast. We live in an increasingly dangerous world, but we also live in an insulated and safe world. Are we embracing philosophies which will make it difficult to defend our country when the time comes? Not sure. Any thoughts about that question? Is that beyond the scope of church leaders? Maybe I don't either. So it's okay if you don't. We don't know. So sorry about that. Yeah, there you go. That's a good way.
I think that this comes back to what I taught in American government class, which is that you better get involved. You write an opinion piece to the newspaper. You get on TikTok and you make a video. It's easier than you think. You talk to your families, you talk to your neighbors, you talk to people. Tell them, I'm worried about this. Is there something we can do? Where's Heather? What's Heather doing tonight? She formed this group here so that we could have a discussion about an important issue. We can all do that. My neighbor, after the events of last weekend, sent out an email to everyone in my local ward of my church saying, we need to talk. We need to become peacemakers. Will everyone come to my house at 7 o'clock tomorrow night? It's Wednesday night, and we'll talk about this. I thought that is so courageous to do that. I don't know who will show up. I know my husband and I will be there. But do those kind of things. Do something to act. I tell you what, you feel good when you act.
I cannot change the world by myself if I wanted to do it, you know, sort of asking that in defense. But each and every one of you here helps us change, helps us do something, even if it's by 1%. Even in our diversity, we might not always agree with each other. We might not always understand each other, where we're coming from and our lifestyle choices. But when we stand side by side, when we look at that within our government, when we look at that within even our military, to have that vast diversity, it's amazing what can happen. And we can change if we choose to work together and if we choose to look at diversity and saying, you know, it's not a bad word, I'm going to accept it.
Thank you. I've got one last question, and then I'll get to this, our last question, okay? So why were there no panelists from other religions? Fair question. Would have loved to have had it. I think one thing is there's talk about maybe doing this again sometime, and maybe love to have other people, other faiths represented. So we would love to have people of other faiths. We weren't able to get any more takers this time, but I think hopefully in the future we could. And so, and maybe maybe let me just share a quick comment before I ask this question. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I want to thank Heather for sponsoring this event. Yeah, really appreciate that. And the organization Indivisible. It takes, and just to note, it takes money to put on an event like this. I mean, they had to rent this place and whatnot. And so if you found this valuable, you can, and you'd like to, you feel free to, you can make a donation on your way out if you'd like.
Where would the donation places be, so they know?
On the door on the way out, okay. And so, you know, they rely on financial support for stuff like this, so I appreciate that. Okay, we're going to close. I'm going to ask one question. I'd like all the panel members to say something. We've got about 13 minutes left or something like that. And then we want to leave about 2 minutes left for a closing statement, okay? So I'm going to close by quoting a Christian scholar and author named Andrew Whitehead. He wrote a book, and he wrote this: through idolizing Through idolizing power, fear, and violence, Christian nationalism betrays the gospel in which Jesus' sacrifice liberates us from our enslavement to sin. It is fundamentally opposed to the ethics and teachings of Jesus. So whatever you'd like to say to comment on that statement. Anyone like to go first? Nancy?
Yes.
Okay. Would you like to add anything else? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I would offer that it just can't be said enough. Christian nationalism is about power and control. It's about persecution and oppression. of anyone who doesn't agree with their particular viewpoint. And I think the vast majority of us as Christians hear a call to something very, very different than that. I think we hear that call to compassion and mercy and grace and loving kindness. And I think we're called to follow Christ to the cross to make this a reality for all our siblings. Now, there may be many expressions of that. Some are conservative, some are progressive, but at the core, our common faith is very different than the fear and damnation that is promoted by Christian nationalism. So we need to speak up for our faith. We need to share the gospel. We need to live our faith out loud in new ways to keep from losing our ability to speak out at all.
Thanks, Gabby.
I told you about my father's side of the family who came from Norway, and on my mother's side, I have a multiple great-grandfather who was living in Missouri with his wife, Drusilla Doris Hendricks. This was a difficult time for members of the LDS faith, and those who were living in Missouri decided they didn't want them there. And so they were trying to force them to leave. In the process, my grandfather, with some other men, hid in a mill at Crooked River. A mob came and started shooting at them. He was shot in the hip, which left him paralyzed. My grandmother put him in a handcart and with her 5 children pulled him across the plains where they settled in Salt Lake Valley. He was not able to provide much of a living for them, so she crocheted, sold what she could, baked bread, sold what she could, all because of hate. This is real for me. It's my story. This weekend, there was some PTSD. As I thought about what had happened at that church, I thought about my family and what they've experienced. And I don't want that for my children and grandchildren, and I don't want it for yours. I don't want it for any of ours. We should be living in peace. And it's my hope that by being here tonight, even though this was extremely difficult for me among these amazing people, I just want to say, it's my hope that by just sharing that story, you will find a way that you too can act against this evil.
I just want to say I'm impressed that you're all here. I called up my son today, saying I'm headed over to Twin. He graduated from Twin Falls High School, went to Wendell and elementary school and everything. And I told him I'm coming over and what the purpose. And he goes, and he's quite an outspoken kid, activist. He's going, I'm scared for you, Dad. You know, I'm scared for what can happen. And his fear was real. And my fear is always real for y'all, because to speak up is not easy to do with people who hate, carry guns and everything else. I'm going to say it's not the 99.99% that you have to worry about. It's that 0.001 that having a bad day. But you all are brave people. And keep being brave. Know that each and every one of you have a voice. And Christian nationalists, as the quotes we heard, want to take that voice away from you. And they want your voice. But they can't have it. As long as you speak, as long as you do, as long as you stand, as long as you base yourself in good, solid principles, maybe even bad principles, just stand. And keep at it. Because they want you to quit. They want to run you down as Charlie Kirk would do, just run you down in the voice. That's how he'd win debates, just roll you over. Don't let someone roll you over. You're a proud people. You're proud out of your traditions, or even the traditions that you might have that you left. You got skills and grace. And it is not easy, but you keep doing it and you keep standing and you keep teaching your kids. And even when they don't want to listen, you do it because you'd be surprised how much they do listen. And I'm going to say thank you. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for who you are, and thank you for each and every voice that you have.
Okay, we have, is there anything, before we share the closing statement, we have a couple minutes. If there's anything anyone else wants to add, you don't have to. If you've got a chance to share everything you wanted to. Okay, so Nancy's going to read our closing statement, and once she finishes, the event is over. It sounds like we got an invitation. If people have questions from our panel members, you're welcome to come forward and ask them afterwards. But we'll close this event as soon as Nancy's finished. So, Nancy, you got the floor. And by the way, I'm going to say again, thank you again for coming. Really appreciate you being here, and such a great audience, and so kind and respectful. We really appreciate it.
And thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Nancy, take it away.
We are all church leaders who are local or locally connected from different denominations. There are things on which we disagree, but we have learned that there are more things on which we agree. We agree that this country was formed on a principle of religious freedom and that no denomination should have preference or power over another. We agree that political violence is never an appropriate response to differing ideologies. We agree that Jesus gave us 2 commandments: to love God with all our hearts and with all our souls and with all our strength and with all our minds, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. And that our neighbor is anyone who needs our help. It may be the person next door, or it may be a person in another community, or in another state, or in another country. We agree that all of us are made in God's image. Everyone of every race, culture, gender identity, citizenship, nationality, faith or no faith, are equally created in God's image. We agree that Jesus expected his followers to feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, visit the sick and those in prison, and to welcome the stranger. We agree that blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God, and that peacemakers are not those who sit by passively or strive for control or power, but are those who work to overcome conflict. We are here tonight because we sometimes agree, and because we sometimes agree to disagree. And we believe that no one person or group or association of groups should use the name of Jesus to declare rights or pursue powers that we believe contradict what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for coming down.
Yeah.
You guys are amazing.